you will never be able to shed this perception that you received where you are because of your gender or your ethnicity. And so I always say embrace it and lead by performance.
Hi, everyone. It's Dean.
And it's B. We're here to help you build your commercial real estate network so you can get your foot in the door and design the career of your dreams.
We interview leaders in commercial real estate and hear their stories of failure, triumph, basic survival, and hard-won wisdom.
It's like having coffee with the real estate pro.
You're listening to How I Got My Job.
Dean, we're excited today. And I know I say I'm excited a lot, but I am excited because the person we have on today is so relatable in a lot of ways, and we are going to dig into her story. And she's, when I think about her story, it really hits home for me. So this is going to be a good one. And I say that a lot because we have great guests. So Dean, you know her really well. Do you want to say any kind words before we introduce her?
No, I think the thing that I'm so excited about is Anar, you were really there at the start of our company and as we launched. And so when we look back, Greg and I look back in our time, we really view meeting you as an inflection point in our careers and in the trajectory of our company. And we were so impressed with you. And it was funny, we were just on with the sound engineer beforehand. He's like, how do you know Anar? She looks amazing. What a story. So we're very excited to dig in. So thank you, Anar, for taking the time. We know you're very busy.
Well, I'm never too busy for this, and the affection is mutual. And how can you not be excited, right? The sun is shining outside. It's an amazing day, and the fact that we're here, being able to do this is, the excitement will be infectious throughout the whole time. So hopefully we can keep that energy up for everyone who's
All right,
listening.
so let me get started and just tell you guys who Anar is. Anar Chudgar is the co-president of Artemis Real Estate Partners, where she is responsible for developing, implementing, and overseeing both equity and credit investment platforms. She has more than 20 years of experience in real estate, principal investing, and investment banking. She sits on the firm's investment committee and serves as the portfolio manager for the Income and Growth Fund. Anar, welcome to the show.
Guys, thank you guys. And listen, it's great to be here, and I think what you guys are doing is really impactful to so many and to the industry because it's about learning and resonating with stories. And I think for me, when I started my career, I didn't have this available. So hopefully this will be able to help and impact some
Thanks,
others.
Anar. So with that being said, can we just talk about what does your role entail? What are the functions, the day-to-day functions? I gave your introduction, but we really want to dig in so that students understand what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it means, I think on day to day, it's never and Dean can relate to this, it's never the same day. And so, as being co-president of the firm, it's effectively continuing to effectuate the strategy of the firm on numerous ways, not just from an investments perspective. So, yes, I'm on the investment committee for all of our vehicles, and my job is to make sure we're effectuating the investment strategy for all of our vehicles, for our fiduciaries, our clients, which are our investors, which are typically pension funds or endowments. And so we're only here because of those investors and clients and performing for them. But we also have a business, and how do we run the day-to-day of the business? So I spend my day in any given day either on the looking at investments or running the firm or speaking to investors and helping our capital formation. Today, Artemis is $10 billion of equity under management. We have 15 vehicles. We invest across the capital stack and across the risk spectrum. So we invest in debt and equity as well as core plus and opportunistic, so lower returning versus higher returning investments. And as I mentioned, 15 vehicles, and that's across different asset classes. So not just in one asset class or one geography. It's all in North America, but across different asset classes. And any given day we have 100 plus people, 4 offices. We're headquartered in DC. I'm sitting in New York, and we have an office in Atlanta and LA. And any given day, I'm either dealing with management of our team, or our what we call our human capital and our talent, or it's just really making the decisions for the firm on a day-to-day basis, and really supporting our co-CEOs.
And Anar just threw out a lot of terms that you may or may not recognize. So, as a reminder, we will have show notes that you guys can reference as you're listening to the podcast. Anar, that was a great description of what you do. I also want to just take a moment and sit back and just so folks who are starting into commercial real estate or thinking about commercial real estate, in order to eventually become you, right? What should they be thinking about? Like, what are they interested in? What should they be interested in? What will make this job fun for them, right? So what should they be
Yeah.
thinking about? Like, is this good for me? If I'm into this, would this help me be the better? Right,
But
right.
right. I get you. So I would say, first of all, I don't want them to be me. I want them to be better than me, at times more surpass me. So I look around my team and I'm so excited about them. They give me energy every day because they are 10 times smarter and better than I was at their age. So I'm so excited about the next gen and Gen Z and what they have to offer. But for me, really, that allowed me to kind of, I grew up, and I know we're going to get into this, in Birmingham, Alabama, where a career in Wall Street just wasn't something that was known about or attainable or talked about. And so for me, what eventually led me here, which I'm sure we'll get into, is I had really my strongest subject in school, and something that I loved was math. I just loved it, and at the time, pretty abnormal as a woman to really outshine everyone in math. Now, I was strong in other academic subjects, but my brain thinks in numbers, and so I always joke. I have a good girlfriend who's an actress, and we go to a birthday party, and she's looking at the floor, at the design of the floor tile. I'm looking at how does this business running with this type of revenue stream, and so it's funny how our brains just think differently. And so for me, what really got me into to finance first was this attraction to math, and then I do think, and then was the tangibility of real estate. So for me, why I was really attracted to the asset class, I kind of fell into the asset class. I didn't seek it out. So that's a lesson learned from others. I really chose the asset class because of the people in the investment banking group, not because of the asset class. But I ended up falling in love with it, and I liked the tangibility of the asset class. And I think for someone to decide, oh, this is what I want to do, I think you have to have the core fundamentals to want. Like, if you're not a math person, that's fine. But even in other aspects of the business, you kind of have to understand how the revenue is generated. So you kind of have to be somewhat leaning into it. Not necessarily, it might not be your strength, but you have to kind of understand it, if that makes sense. So I would think if
Yeah.
you're not good at any of those two aspects, it may be more difficult, or it may not be as fulfilling every day, right? You want to go to work every day and have passion for what you do. And I get up every day excited about what I do, and I tell my children often is that I don't go to work, I get to work, and
Yeah.
that's something that resonates, and hopefully that will resonate with the people who are listening.
Anar, I think that that's right. When I started my career as a lawyer in real estate, I ended up taking all these real estate finance courses, and people kept asking me, why are you wasting your time? And I said, look, you can't understand what your clients' needs are and how they're thinking about investments without taking this. So I think that that's absolutely right. That permeates across your career and across the jobs that are in commercial real estate. But we want to dig in. We want to hear your story, Anar. So maybe start from the beginning. Take us to Birmingham, Alabama. Lay out the scenery and tell us, where you were in high school and how you were thinking about college, because a lot of our students actually come from high school to this program. So that's a helpful transition for people to think about.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wasn't thinking about anything. But no, I just want it to be a little bit more refreshing for people in high school because I think especially for this new generation, everybody's like they have to have their whole life figured out in high school or in, I see it with my children who are 11 and 8. He's already like planning his whole like career and every and trajectory, and I would say first and foremost, like your youth is very precious, and I used to say that when I was younger, and I never realized it until you get older, and you're like, yes, enjoy your youth, enjoy it. But I went to the Alabama School of Fine Arts, which was a fine arts high school where I double majored, and in the arts and math science. For me, again, that was in downtown Birmingham, and it really changed my perspective on the world, and not necessarily academically. It was um, a very academically a rigorous high school,
Hmm.
but for me, it was really this and what I would describe as that allowed me to build a huge strength of mine, which is um, ability to assimilate well. And so, or as someone people in the industry call it, say you're a chameleon because you like I get into different groups and I can just relate to them and have this relatability. I grew up in a small area or a suburb of Birmingham, which is in River Chase, and in that in that market or in that town, we were one of the only minorities in that town, and so
Hmm.
then I go from there from K through 8, then to high school, which was in downtown Birmingham, where actually we were majority African American, and it was a magnet school that you had to test into, so you didn't have to pay. It was state funded, and but yet it was just this really high quality education in downtown Birmingham, and I think for me it not only changed my mindset of the world, right? Because I went from K through 8 being like very different from everyone else, and
Hmm.
then I went through to high school, and I was actually still very different because there
Yeah.
weren't many Indian Americans in that school, but there was a lot of different people, and so it allowed me to see and be empathetic and relate to different people's perspectives, and I think that was really impactful for my career. And I don't, and until recently, I was actually having a similar situation like this, probably 7 years ago, and someone really brought that out of me, saying, "Listen, that's why you're good at what you do." And I said, "Huh, I never thought about it like that." And I do think that those lessons learned, those moments where you have to be resilient and say, how I'm going to use our differences and make us stronger, or make myself like allow myself to grow as a person. Those kind of moments and lessons learned in high school are what really I think impacts you later versus the math test or the science test you take. You all that will be net helpful. You obviously have to get good grades to get into a good school,
Hmm.
but all that I think that resiliency and really gaining from others that are different from you are really be one of the things that you're going to be able to translate later in life. So high school from Birmingham was trying to go to a school out of state, and my parents were very conservative. Indian Americans had immigrated from and I just have one sister who's older who stayed local. They said, no, you're not going away. I got into a great university in the Northeast, and they said, no way, you're not going. You're staying in state. So I actually got a scholarship at a small private liberal arts school in Birmingham, and that because I had gotten this full scholarship, they said, okay, fine, you can go there instead of going to this 6-year med school program that my sister had gone to. And I really do, these little lessons that you learn. Like I went to my sister and I said, should I go into the 6-year medical school program? And she said, how sure are you about medicine? And I said, 90%. And she was like, you need to be 120%. And
Yeah.
so you should do that. And I was like, okay. And it was a great experience, but it was a small private liberal arts school in Alabama where I had taken so many AP courses and had so many, accelerated curriculum. So I was going to graduate in 2 years, and I started taking these business economics classes in this small business school, this business program, economics program within this small liberal arts school in Alabama, and and the deans of that program. So these are different little moments that really have changed the trajectory of your life.
Right.
They said, we see you're gonna graduate in 2 years with all your credits. We would like you to be the first person to do the study abroad program at the school. And I said, my parents wouldn't let me go to the Northeast. They're not letting me go abroad. And they said, no, 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 we'll talk to your parents. And I said, okay, best of luck. I put that part
Yeah.
and after 7 conversations with my parents, they got my parents on board for the educational aspect and the fact that they were going to pay me to pay tuition and everything else to go to uh, this economic school in Amsterdam, and
Wow.
and that really changed the trajectory of my life because I then went to Amsterdam and spent 6 months there, and I had a very sheltered childhood, a very local upbringing in Alabama, and going to Amsterdam blew my world, right? And so on so many aspects, at the time it was Bush versus Gore, and so the perspective of all the Europeans at that time, it was 2000, and so all the perspective of the different Europeans, and the program was very international, and so I really just challenged my thinking, and at that moment, and all things kind of lead back again to family and little decision tree and moments. I expressed to my parents that I really liked business, and I wasn't sure how to craft a career in that.
So,
And
Anar, I want
go
to
ahead.
stop you for 2 seconds because your
Yep,
whole story had so many themes that I want to pull out, and I don't want to miss
yep.
that. And so before we go to the
Okay, so
yeah,
go
so
to
before
things.
we go to the next segment, because that's going to take us to another part, I do want to go back and walk
Yep,
through some things. So the first thing you talked about was really being in a place where you didn't see anyone who looked like you. You were by yourself, and we all know that you don't grow when things are easy. And when you're young, you can't tell someone young going through tough times that that's the case. But when you're
yep,
older, that's when you realize like, wow, all those things I went through really prepared me for something that I'm doing right now. Right. And I really want to talk
right,
about that because right now people are going through some tough times, especially this demographic. They're going to school full time, they're working full time. They can't really dig into either both like as good as they want to be, right? Like I could be an A student, but because I'm going to work full time, I'm a B student. Like those type of
right,
challenges, right? Can you just talk
yep.
about um that strength that you needed to have when you were young and how that is now serving you now, and that's that survival mechanism you call it became a strength. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
I actually, I didn't know any different, and so I think having that it wasn't. I didn't look around and say, "Woe is me! Why am I the only one?" Right? I said, "Oh, okay. Well, Megan, Gracie, whoever, yeah, they live very different lives. They go, on the week, they live a very similar life they do on the weekdays and the weekends. I lived a very different life. On the weekdays, I was one person. On the weekends, I was a different person because of my culture and my parents and what we did on the weekends. But for me, it was the strength comes into work ethic and ambition, right? And even when I was that young, I didn't have necessarily ambition, but I had this feeling of I want to see the world and I want to figure out. I mean, honestly, it goes back to the American dream of, and I think I believe I fed into that and said, okay, in America, because my parents came from India, and at that time, I think it's different today, but at that time, as a female, the opportunities were limited, right? And my mom would often say to me, "We're here for you both, my sister and I. You get to, the world is your oyster. You basically can achieve anything you want as long as you want it, right?" And um, I really took that to heart, and every opportunity I said, how am I going to find the path and the way, right? And I think if you have that mentality, and quite frankly, the work ethics. What I didn't mention is that my parents owned convenience stores in Alabama. And so every day before school, my mom would open the store and she would bring me and my sister to the store, and that was our morning, right? And then she would have us go to school, and then after school we would work in the store. And there were times where my sister and I were left to tend the store, and I would sweep the hallways and restock the shelves, and that was just a part of our family. And yet all of that, we all ate together at 9 o'clock at night. Like, that was something that was non-negotiable, that they always kept together. And so all those little life lessons, I think, so seeing how hard my parents worked, and seeing that they continue to have this hope and this joy and this ambition for us, I think really changed our mindset. So while it may have seemed different and it may have seemed difficult as we look back, at the time we didn't feel that way.
And I do want to talk about your parents a little bit, because I think that also, as you mentioned, made you become who you are today, right? So
Yeah,
your parents in their country in India, they had their degree, right? And they were
yeah,
able to get really high in their careers there. They said, you know what, we want our kids to have a better future. So they kind of left their future behind to come here. When they came
right,
here, they couldn't use those degrees that they had. They really had to start
right.
from scratch. They had to map their own way to become entrepreneurs, right? And for you, I feel like that happened with you. You
Right,
mapped your way as well, right? Can you talk about, like,
right.
because that resonates to me so much, because you're like, if this isn't working for me here, you now have this intuition to be able to map your own way. It's built in you. Can you talk about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I mean, in so many aspects, right? And I'll go back to finish that story. When I was in Amsterdam, got a call from a third cousin on a payphone, because at that time you weren't calling on cell phones, and and he was describing his role Solomon Smith Barney in investment banking. And I said, that's what I want to do. And he said, well, I said, well, how do I get there? And he said, you have to go to a feeder school. So I was like, okay, I'll graduate and go to business school. And he said, no, you should transfer. So that moment, the next day, I applied to the Wharton School, and I applied to transfer from Birmingham Southern College in Birmingham to the Wharton School. Didn't ask my parents. So there's again me
Wow.
at that point, I felt strong enough and confident enough in my own skill set to say, hey, I can do this. I got in, told my parents. They said, you're not going. And I said, no, no, I am going. I'll take the loans out on my own and I'll pay for it. And they said, they were like, okay, like, what are they going to do at this point?
Right.
So for me, that was also me having I think this is a Yiddish word, a chutzpah, to really go out and say, hey, I'm going to do this. And it happened on numerous points in my career, which we can speak to, which is, early in my career, I was fortunate enough to get a investment banking position in real estate investment banking at JP Morgan. Then I went to the buy side like everybody else. And then the GFC happened, right? The GFC happened, which none of us would have been able to predict, which is the great financial crisis in '08. And that really, living and breathing in New York at that time was extremely impactful, not only from how it affected your investment acumen. You realize what you had been underwriting for so long, what you had been trained, really can come to fruition, and you can lose. The numbers are real, and so you have to live and breathe with what you've put on paper. And the restructuring and the devaluing of assets was pervasive. And so I learned so many lessons, but at the same time, I was at the family formation phase of my life. And so I had to make a choice of, what do I want to do to have a family and also continue my career. And that was the decision to go to Credit Suisse / GCM Grosvenor, where I was able to have 2 kids and have a great family and have a good, um, trajectory there. But then again, going to a point and really feeling to say, hey, what is next? Because you could always stay, and then so that there's a thematicness about, I'm trying to find my own path, and
Hmm.
I could have taken the easier way. I could have stayed in Birmingham. I could have, gone back. I could have not worked. I could have, I could have stayed at my previous role, but I really had to have the confidence and figure out, and the ability to feel uncomfortable to go out and take risks.
The drive that you're talking about is a pressure that you have, right? And I want to mention that first generation pressure of never feeling like you're done, always feeling like there's this other thing that you have to do. Because you're right, you could have stayed comfortable and you're getting paid well here, and I could be done, and I'm taking care of my family, but there's a pressure. And I do want to, before Dean, you go to your next question, I want to acknowledge that pressure that you feel and talk about it, because everyone's sitting in it right now, even myself. So I want to talk
Right.
through it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the pressure is twofold. The pressure is, I do feel a pressure that my parents came here. They came from affluent families in India. Um, they sacrificed. My dad was a chemical engineer who actually got his master's and degrees here, but my mom had her master's in India, and they didn't acknowledge it here. But they did make sacrifices for my sister and I, and so for me and my sister, it is that pressure. So that is one pressure I feel all the time. But there's another pervasive, two more pervasive pressures. One is in the industry and saying, if I can't do it when I look like me, I feel the weight of the industry on my shoulders a bit, because I have to succeed or the others behind me are not going to. And whether there's unconscious bias in the industry or not, like, I have to prove myself, and I feel like for others. And then the last pressure is for my children, because if I choose, I get to work. I feel, for me personally, I'm successful when my children can come to me and say, "Mom, we're so proud of what you've achieved." For me, that, and not sacrificing anything on them, and them having a great happy childhood. So for me, it's those three things that really drive that pressure, and maybe that's a part of being a first gen. Yeah.
Anar, that's a big needle to thread there, as we say in the industry. Figuring out, how to be a parent, how to navigate a new world, how to continue to move your career forward. B always talks about an experience that she faces, and I know a lot of the students that we mentor face, which is, if they're going into a realm that their parents don't understand, that's always challenging, right? And then, how do you grow from there? And I'd be interested to just take a step back, Anar. So you had a really interesting inflection point. It sounds like when you were in Amsterdam, you heard about investment banking. I always think that there's a difference between your early career and your later career. And a lot of people look to people that are in their later parts of their career and say, yes, that's what I want to do, and I want to be spending my time doing that. But you kind of need to put in the blocking and tackling and the effort in your earlier part of your career and become an expert at something. And I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that and what you would recommend to students through your own experience on how you build up to be able to be the person that is, a co-president and wearing many hats.
Yeah. So it's so funny that you asked that question, because I was just having a conversation, and my team will laugh when they hear this, because I'm going to use their words, their terminology. So we were discussing just early career mentality, and this exact point came up, and I hear it all the time. I have many of my younger teammates who are VPs, SVPs are like, when am I going to run the firm, right? And I think this market that we're currently in is really kind of showing the differences in leadership and experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've been through so many cycles, there's a reason why people want someone with a certain number of years of experience, because they have gone through those cycles. And so my recommendation to the younger team is severalfold. It's you have to have the fundamentals. If I hadn't done the investment banking training, I still to this day can go to a model, can open up any model, and can tell you where the error is, right? Because technically I'm very quantitatively I'm very strong. My brain works in numbers, and I've been able, and the work ethic that investment banking um, trained me was really trained me for later in my career. It also taught you an attention to detail where you can look across the page and automatically pick up the mistakes and or the inconsistencies. And I think that processing quickly when you're young, your brain works. I mean, I know now, and I'm sure Dean you can relate, and me you can relate. My brain is very tired, and so I feel like when you're young and you develop those skill sets, is going to impact you later in your career. But I also think what's really important, which I think is hard for younger generations today, is this concept where I was talking to my teammates, and they're like, the person has to be willing to eat concrete, was what they said, eat concrete. And I said, what does that mean? I was like, because I had no idea what that meant. They're like, no, like, just be willing to do anything. Like, be willing to, like, and I gave an example of something happened to me, and I said, they're like, yeah, you definitely ate concrete. I was like, okay. But I think it's the work ethic and and that nothing comes easy, right? And I think, when we look at this new generation, which I realize different moments of time will impact, like Dean, for your and my children, COVID's going to be probably really impactful for them as they get older, and we don't sure how that is going to play itself out.
Right.
But for this new generation, it's this, I can tell that it's not, we, and it as on the cusp of a Gen X and a millennial, like, I just knew that there was no way, no one's going to help me. I just had to do it. And I think there are more resources today, like this podcast, for this new gen, and which is great. But also, we can't remove the work ethic. And I think, and my advice to young people is be patient. There's a reason why someone is at that level.
Yeah.
Very rarely is it luck. Most probably is because they were very smart or strategic, and they're intelligent, and they have good work ethic. And so for that new gen, that's something that I would make sure that they have, in addition to all the technical skills that I just spoke about.
No, that's great, Anar. And it sounds like, I know, because I've known you for a while, that you take mentorship very seriously, and you mentor a lot of folks as they're growing up. How about for yourself, as you were starting in the business? How did you find mentors? Are there people that influence your career? And were you able to find women, and others that sort of shared some of your experience that could relate? Because I think it's tough when you can't find people that relate with your particular pains.
It's really funny. So when I started investment banking analyst 2003, Jamie Dimon was CEO, and I actually look up to him significantly. I mean, a lot of people look up to him, but as an analyst, to be in that analyst training program, have Jamie Dimon, who, again, this is 21 years ago. He wasn't as of a celebrity as he is today. Have him speak to you just as CEO of Oregon was impactful. And one thing he said to me was, we said to our whole analyst class, was you need to find mentorships. You need to find mentors, and that they will impact the rest of your career. So what did I do as a first-year analyst? I went back to my desk, and I'm like, how do I find a mentor? Right? And I'm listening to what he said. I'm going to do it. And I didn't find a mentor. And so I would say, it's funny, Dean, you asked that question, because I've thought about this. I didn't really find a mentor who was truly invested in my career until I went to Credit Suisse and Grosvenor. Mm-hmm. And that is something that is really interesting, because I think a lot of young people say, I got to go find. I mean, I've had people come to me, can you be my mentor? And I've said, I'm happy to provide you advice and mentorship. But mentorship is not a transaction.
Right.
It is a relationship. And it has to happen organically. And it doesn't have to happen in your organization. It can happen outside of your organization. But it can't be this, if someone comes up to me and says, be my mentor, that's not going to happen, right? Because you want something from me, right? And I think it has to be synergistic and symbiotic. And you have to be giving something to the mentor, and the mentee is also taking something, and it has to be a relationship build. I have amazing mentees. Most of my mentees are either people who have worked for me or people who I have been introduced to, who I've invested interest, who we just got along and we enjoyed time together, right? And yet they were 10 years, 15 years younger than me, but I enjoyed that conversation, that I was like, oh, I'm going to take a vested interest. I thought this person was smart. I think that the way they're thinking about their career or their job or um, or their future is really interesting. There was something that stood out about that person, and also something I connected with. So I think that is important for a takeaway for this audience. And so when I went to Credit Suisse / Grosvenor, I was at 29. So from 22 to 29, if you ask me, did I have a mentor? The answer was no. Now, I will say, if I go back now that I'm in over the past 15 years, some of those people who were the 22 to 29 have showed up as mentors to me, but at that time we didn't maybe connect in that way.
Yeah.
And then the only other things, I've gone a little long-winded here. The only other thing that I would say that's been really impactful, most of my mentors are not women. There are men who don't look like me. And so what I want to ensure that the audience takes away is, you don't have to find a person that looks like you or is the same. It's actually stronger. It's actually better to have someone who's different, because it challenges your thinking. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention two of the strongest mentors of my career, which have been Peter Brafman, who I worked with and who's been on the podcast, worked with for 9 years. He really gave me the autonomy and the pedestal to stand on, and built confidence in me in a way that was differentiated. And he treated me as an equal partner to really build that business. And then the second one would be Debbie Hartman, who is co-founder of Artemis. And we, again, going back to this organic situation, we met across the table where I was looking to whether to invest in Artemis, and she took an invested interest in me 9 years before I ended up joining Artemis. And we ended up having that synergistic relationship where every quarter we would meet and she invested time in me and I invested time to ensure that I was adding value for her, right? Mm-hmm. And any of the conversations, even today, even at my level, when I'm speaking to some of my other mentors, like Chris Merrill from Harrison Street or Sunny Kelsey from BGO, I'm trying to start bringing something to that. They are definitely giving me advice in my career and how to craft the next phase of my career, and I'm trying to help them in any way I can. So whether it's help them with their business or other ways to introduce them to other people, I'm always thinking about it. Like, it needs to be.
I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're young in your career, because you don't have that currency necessarily to add, but it doesn't mean that you can't send an article to somebody or, hey, I'm thinking about you. There are things in your toolkit that can be helpful, or I noticed, you were interested in this, so I put together a couple of slides that you might find interesting.
But it's also, Dean, it goes back to that early skill set that I talked about, attention to detail. Yeah. And that can show up in a conversation with someone. Distracted. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people who've said, I want to meet you, have time, and I try to make time for everyone who calls me. And that's something that I'm very intentional about. I can't tell you how many times I've met people who were distracted, didn't want to engage, yet they asked me for time. Right. And so if you're that attention to detail, because exactly what you said, if you pick up on things that, if I talk about data centers or something, or industrial in some submarket, and then you come across something that you might find interesting, that effort to send that is really, that's impactful. I don't know, at least for me that is.
Yeah, I think those small things make a difference. I also think that, and I'd be curious on this, because I'd say, Anar, you've been one of sort of my mentors from afar, that you don't always have to be in a relationship to learn from other leaders in in the business. Not that we're not in a relationship, but I don't I don't call you all the time looking for guidance on
But you
every
call me
move, but
enough.
I call you
Yeah,
enough.
yeah,
And I feel like
yeah.
Peter in the same way has been similarly. I watch you present. I've read your, even just reading your bio on here and all the skills and how you think about your role and having empathy because you're trying to put yourselves in the shoes of your investors of the
Yeah.
new companies that you're operating them, and you're thinking about both the investment strategy and the operating strategy. I remember early on asking you sort of, hey, what are the pitfalls as people build out a company? And I still talk about those today. You had said, look, sometimes people build too quickly on personnel and they get ahead of themselves. And, so I think, and I'd be curious to see if you've had that in your life where you can learn and sort of look at other people's trajectories, read their writings, and and actually gain something without having to be necessarily having lunch with Jamie Dimon every day.
Yes, of course. And I think to the positive and to the negative, right? So,
Great point.
so y- 100%, right? I look at a lot of the leaders in the real estate space, or even finance, or mez, or private equity, or whatever, and I see. And I did that a lot when I was younger, right? I kept looking at people's career trajectories, and I was saying, okay, well, if I do this, I'll get that, and if I do that, I'll get that, and if I do that, I'll get that. What I missed, though, just to the negative, what I missed was that there were some people have differentiated networks, and that's because of where they grew up, or who their family is, or where they went to school, or whatever. Because I went to Wharton undergrad, right? But I was there the last 2 years. It took me a lot to finish that, to make sure I graduated in time. So I went from potentially graduating early, to potentially graduating late, because I transferred as a junior transfer. And then seeing all these amazing jobs that my classmates got, and then after, and I was like, okay, we're level playing field. I'm in J.P. Morgan, investment banking analyst. Then I just started seeing some of my classmates just getting promoted really early, like 2 years, and then they get promoted, and then they get promoted again, and then next thing you know, someone's in KKR in the C-suite, and I'm like, wait a minute,
Right.
I'm still like associate. Like how do they get that? For me, what I've learned is put blinders on, because if I get too involved in other people's career trajectories, then I will that impacts my day to day, and it gets me down. Like, why can't I be? I always approach it like this is a marathon, it's not a race, and I have to put my head down and focus on my career, and I'll achieve accordingly, right? And I think so. I do think looking at others' careers from afar really is good lessons learned. Again, to the positive and negative. There was a whole in the GFC, a lot of people who chose to go into certain asset classes, like CMBS and others, really had a hard time recreating themselves post GFC.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was my lesson learned when I saw that from afar? It was, hey, don't niche yourself, right?
Right.
Keep yourself broad, and and then be able to do different aspects of business, not just being able to do investments, right? I looked at a lot of CEOs. What did they do? Were they always just in one part of the business, or were they in other aspects of business? Now, there is a lot of CEOs who came from the investment side, but there are also a lot of CEOs or people who have just recently been elevated who came from the capital formation side,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you say, okay, maybe if I have my hand in both of those things, then that is going to make me a more well-rounded person. So I think that's how I really look at from afar. And Dean, I do consider you a friend, and you guys mentor me in ways that help me with our industrial strategies. I always call you guys, ask, what do you think about this market or that market? So I do appreciate
I
that.
appreciate that the lesson that you just taught, because we are in a social media world where that is all
Yeah,
people do. They are online all day looking at what everyone else is up to. And the fact that if you can't put your
yeah.
blinders on, then you're going to have some depressing times in your life. So thank you for mentioning that. It's something that's going to resonate with all of the audience, right? So thank you for that.
Yeah, and this was before social media
Right, right.
existed, so so yes, it's 10 times even more relevant today.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention, just you mentioned it earlier, when you were in school, you were the only underrepresented person in the room, right? You come into a
Yeah.
space where that continues to be the case. And
Yep.
with this demographic that we're talking to, that is going to be the case in a lot of the times, even till today, right? What are some of those obstacles you had to overcome in that room? How do you get through it? Because again, that becomes hard and challenging too. And how do you keep pushing forward?
Yeah. It's a great question. First and foremost is I don't look at them as obstacles. I look at them as a bit of well, I guess I'm going to show everyone around me that I am there. I'm in the room, not because of how I look and my gender, but because I'm just as smart and I can do 10 times better transactions than or run a company 10 times better than the person across the table. And so that's always been my approach since I was younger. And actually recently had a lunch with a mentee who was underrepresented female, and she said to me, um, when do I get to shed this layer of people think I have this opportunity? I'm really good. She's at one of the bigger shops, and she's had a really good career trajectory. And she's like, people look at me and they think I'm here because of how I look and and my gender. And I said to her, embrace it. I was like, who cares what they think? You show them that you are 10 times smarter, 10 times more capable, and that action will lead for itself. You will never be able to shed this perception that you received where you are because of your gender or your ethnicity. And so I always say embrace it and lead by performance. And if you can perform and if you are strong, opportunities just present themselves to you. And I would just say that, and I in ending this lunch, I said to her, I still deal with it. Recently, there was one of our investors was in the Middle East, and he calls me up, and because he's a personal friend as well, and he said, "Hey, guess what? You're being talked about in the Middle East." And I said, "What?" He was like, "They were talking about Artemis, and they're talking about how they have this amazing uh, woman there, and they said, oh, there's this amazing woman, but she's good." And I said, I'm sorry. And I was like, why did he say, but she's good? And that really bothered me for a while. I had to go to my executive coach, and I felt like it was deal with that because I still, even 21 years in, even with my title today, even some random person who heard about our organization in the Middle East said that. And so
Mhm.
I can either put me down and say, okay, let that get in my head, or I can move it, compartmentalize it, and say, I'm going to prove all of them wrong. And because they kept saying, because they have that but, and so that there's never a but for the next gen who stand up and are strong and are leaders.
Yeah.
So that's
I always
how
say, let it fuel me to keep
yeah,
pushing. And
yeah.
so thank you for those great words, because it's going to go far for myself and everyone else, because it happens even no matter where you are in your career. So keep going, guys. It's important that you do, because you're making it better for the next person behind you. Yeah.
100.
So, Anar, we don't want to keep you too long. You promised us an hour. I want to be respectful of that, and that's it. So, we are going to wrap this up. But before we do, we always ask a question of all of our guests. Dean is going to take it away. And Dean, do you want to jump right in on that?
No, Anar, we always have the final question, and I think you're of my vintage enough that you remember the Hot Tub Time Machine movie in reference, and so I call it the Hot Tub Time Machine question, which is really if you've learned so much that has through your years and that has gotten you to where you are. If you were to go back in time and have a chance to talk to the high school you, not that you'd want to change anything in your trajectory, and maybe it's the college you, because that's probably that's looking to get into this career, what would you say to support that person, or what advice would you give?
Relax. You will achieve. You will. It's funny. I actually was in this. Was in Portugal last summer with my kids and my husband, and my best friend of 20 years, who I met studying abroad. She's Canadian, and we still stayed best friends. And we were in this boat, right? And with kids, and we were snorkeling. And I looked at my husband and I said, "This is incredible, right?" And I, the fact that I was there with these two amazing children that I have this great marriage, and I have maintained this amazing friendship, and this is what I had dreamed of when I was in that college person, right? I dreamed of having an office. At that time, I just wanted an office, right?
Yeah.
And I think I was very apprehensive, and I was always trying to, what's next? And I wish I could say to myself, and now maybe that what's next drove me, so I have to be careful about that, but I do wish sometimes as I look back that I had a little bit more fun. I feel like I do have a little fun, but could have had a little bit more. And just like enjoyed the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I instead of worrying about what's next, really embrace everything around you, because everything's always ever evolving. As you said, the real estate industry is all ever evolving. Your life is ever evolving. And so I think just really enjoy those moments and know, and this is what I say to everyone, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but your career is a marathon, it's not a race, right? What's the race? Where are you getting to? Where are you going, right? What happens once you achieve that? You're going to want to achieve something else.
Right.
So think of your career as a marathon, not a race. And therefore, then you will take moments, which I feel like I've been better at over the past 10 years, to just embrace the now. Mm-hmm. And really enjoy the moment, because it is ever evolving. Things are always changing.
Guys, I told you this was going to be good. I warned you, and I know you left with everything you needed to hear today. Anar, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. We appreciate it. And
thank you.
I don't know what else to say. Thanks.
Well, no, thank you guys for the opportunity. Dean, I also just want to applaud your efforts and Northbridge's efforts in putting this together and having this. I mean, because you guys are a growing company, and to make this effort for the industry is really something unique and differentiated. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to How I Got My Job, a podcast from Coffee Connectors.
Coffee Connectors helps connect first-gen college students with a whole new level of opportunity in commercial real estate.
To learn more, visit coffeeconnectors.com.
We would love to connect with you.